This is the first time that in the second to the last worship song, I notice the phrase, "we're looking for some sugar." My wife this morning, I went to take my mother-in-law back to the airport at 8 a.m., and I had played a little pickleball before that, and so came, jumped in the shower, got ready, loaded up, and realized that by the time I got her there and back, I wouldn't have time to have breakfast. And so I just put some caramel corn and some yogurt-covered pretzels in a cup and said, okay, I kind of tried to do it secretly, but she saw it, and she's like, "That's not breakfast." And I'm like, "It is now." And she's like, "You got to come back and have some eggs or something to balance that out, that sugar out." And so you think that my enthusiasm this morning is of the Holy Spirit. It's not. Hopefully it's partially the Holy Spirit. And then it's all the sugar that I've had over the last 5 days. Because in our family, we have at least two traditions that are both amazing but hard on us as a family. And the first one is my wife makes peanut butter candy that you can't imagine. I can't even describe it to you. Her family tries to make it and duplicate it. She's given the recipe to several different people, and she just is magic. And that stuff is amazing, and you just don't want to stop eating it. And then for Christmas, on Christmas Eve day, I make cinnamon rolls, everything, so they're ready to go. When I get up a little earlier, I put them in the oven, and as people wake up to open their stockings and those kinds of things, they're warm, and there's cinnamon rolls in the air and things like that. If you follow me on Instagram, you can see my daughter and I post cooking videos. Some of you know this. We post cooking videos, and so we did the cinnamon rolls for this week, the cooking videos for the cinnamon rolls this week, which one thing that we call them cooking videos, they're not. We don't give a recipe, and we don't give instructions. We just film what we're doing in the kitchen while we're putzing around and things like that. But I'm all hopped up on sugar. Let's go. Okay, welcome to the Lost Sunday, the unknown week, the on week, all these things. This is a tough Sunday. It's tough because it sits just far enough away from Christmas Eve that you can't cancel the service, right? And it's not quite New Year when we're all ready to make some new resolutions, be nice to God again, all these kinds of things. And so it gets a little bit lost. It's a tough Sunday. And we're Baptists, so we don't celebrate the lectionary. We try to mix it in every once in a while. We're not high church. We don't have liturgy. I grew up in a liturgical church, so Epiphany means something to me. So this is the third day of Epiphany, 3 French hens. You celebrate the Trinity, right, because of the number 3. All those things are really important in high church. So Advent starts, right, the first 4 weeks before Christmas. Then there's Christmas. Then there's Epiphany. In the church calendar, these are called sacred times. There's one other sacred time in the church calendar. It's Lent and Easter, right? The two great celebrations that we have in the Christian church. But what we usually do, since we don't do the liturgy and things like that, every once in a while we'll do it, but we don't generally do it, what we do is we cluster sermons together, and we have little themes, right? So the last 4 weeks of Advent, we've been celebrating the meaning of some of the great Christmas hymns. Before that, our themes was wrapped around Philippians chapter 4, one of my favorite chapters in the Bible. And then in January, we'll start a new series on the life of Jesus as we move to this second sacred time of Lent and Easter. In between those times, between our Epiphany ends and Lent starts, that's called ordinary time. It doesn't mean that it's not important. It just means that it isn't a part of these two big celebrations, right? And the sacred times are meant for us to live into the ordinary times. So we have this Sunday, and because it's where it's placed, and you all are here, and that's great and exciting. I have a little wiggle room on the sermon because we just ended a series, and we haven't started a series, so I have a little wiggle room. And Rachel's going, "Oh my gosh, really?" Okay. So what I thought I'd do is, it's still Christmas season. It's still Epiphany. It's not even the new year yet. So what I thought I'd do is, I thought I would share a little bit more personally about what Christmas and what the Christmas season means to me and my faith. Just a few things that I think about. And usually how we operate in my family is my wife, Bonnie, anticipates everything. She's looking forward to it. She plans for it, these kinds of things. And I reflect on things backwards. So it makes for some interesting planning things in our family. But that's kind of how we do it. And so I thought I'd share why Christmas, what it means to me and my faith personally. Okay, so let's talk. If you were to read all four Gospels together, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, you'll notice something very interesting. Only Matthew and Luke have the birth of Jesus story. John and Mark don't have that story. You would think that this is such an important holiday in the Christian church. You would think that, all the Gospels would have this story in it, but they don't. Only Matthew and Luke. So let me make just a short digression. Most New Testament scholars think that Matthew and Luke take the architecture of Mark's gospel, which was the first gospel written, most people think, and they add to it, they add some texture to it based on their audience, right? John is the last gospel written, and he's just doing his own thing, right? The first three gospels are the synoptic gospels because they are very similar. And then John's gospel takes all these short stories in the synoptics, focuses on a few of them, and expands them out, gives them a little bit more meaning. And so here we have Matthew and Luke taking Mark, who doesn't talk about the birth of Jesus, and he's going to expand. They're going to tell that story. And this is important because as you read these stories of Jesus' birth, you will see different details between Matthew's account of Jesus' birth and Luke's account of Jesus' birth. And during Advent and Christmas, we usually read Luke's account. Why? Because he just has more material there. Luke has 2 chapters on the birth of Jesus. Matthew has 2 chapters on the birth of Jesus. But Luke has 137 verses in those 2 chapters. They're long 2 chapters. If you're reading the Bible in a year, you're like Psalm 139 and Luke's 1 and 2, you know, those are like take up 2 days at least. So 137 verses on the birth of Christ in Luke, 19 verses in Matthew. So usually we take up Luke's reading. Matthew's gospel in the birth story emphasizes that Jesus came from the right people and the right place, right? The right people and the right place according to the expectations that were set in the Hebrew scriptures, that the Jewish community had been reading for thousands of years, and there's an expectation that God is going to intervene in the world, and Matthew is saying that Jesus, in his birth, came from the right people in the right place. Luke's gospel is a little different. He emphasizes that Jesus came at the right time. He mentions several key historical figures. Theophilus, shout out to Zach and Sarah, Herod, Zechariah, Caesar Augustus, Quirinius, the governor of Syria. He also uses time-bound prepositional phrases. In those days, after these days, now the time came. All of this it helps us notice a very earthly reality. So Matthew is communicating a spiritual reality. God has been working throughout history to this moment of Jesus' birth through the right people in the right place. Luke is trying to locate Jesus' birth in this specific moment in history, in first century Palestine. And so he's doing something very earthy. So Matthew's kind of a little bit of spiritual, and Luke is a little bit of like, hey, let's ground this thing in reality here. This is the time. These are the people. This is the political situation, the religious situation in first century Palestine at this moment when Jesus is born. Okay, so this is the first reason why Christmas is meaningful to me, because it's a story of a moment when the spiritual and earthly realities meet. Some people call these thin spaces where you just kind of see the sacred in your life or in the world or something like that, where you just like, oh, there's something here. It's not ordinary, but it's sacred. Like we said, this is sacred time in the church calendar. So it's a story of when the spiritual and earthly realities meet, if you take Matthew's account and Luke's account together. Charles Taylor, the great philosopher, Canadian philosopher, calls these moments deep time. Right? They're contrasted with everyday time or ordinary time. Deep time is when things begin to crunch together so you don't see, when you can picture yourself in that moment back there, because you have these moments too. These sacred moments where earth and heaven meet together, right? So deep time is contrasted with ordinary time when these two realities come together. This is not the only time in the Bible where this happens, but this is one of the most important times. Theologians call this the incarnation, when God becomes a human being. God enters a world that he created in order to address some problems, to help us out, where heaven and earth meet, and we see a glimpse of that. Here's what John says in his gospel, John 1, verses 1 and 2, and then 14. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. John is talking about Jesus. He was in the beginning with God, and the Word became flesh. The spiritual realities met the earthly realities and lived among us. And we have seen his glory, the glory of a Father's only Son, full of grace and truth. This is meaningful to me, this sacred meeting between spiritual realities and earthly realities, because I've experienced this. And I think you have too, right? There's been moments in my life where I've seen a glimpse of the spiritual through something that's happened in my life. Sometimes it's out in nature. I just see something and it's like, oh, yeah, God is here. Right? There are just moments in time. And usually when I'm talking to people who are exploring faith or who are interested in faith but don't yet believe in God, don't yet believe in Christ, actually, I ask them, are there any kind of quote-unquote serendipitous moments that you can't quite explain? Are there some things in your life or some circumstances that you wonder how this happened? And almost everybody says yes. And I said, do you ever have a question about God's existence, like kind of a small belief there? And oftentimes people will say yes, because we've experienced these sacred moments. And maybe at a birth of your own children or somebody else's children in your family, right? But we experience these sacred moments, and you would think that if I can experience a small glimpse of that we should look for them from God in the world, and here you have it in Jesus. So this is the first reason why the Christmas season is meaningful and the Christmas story is meaningful to me. The second reason, I have 4. Sorry. Most sermons are 3. I have a bonus for you. The second reason why Christmas is meaningful to me, it is a story about God's vulnerability and our own vulnerability. God set out to accomplish his purposes in the world through a baby. Think about that for a minute. That's pretty astounding when we reflect on it. It's a baby born to a young mother in first century Palestine. Not the easiest time for someone to be born. In the course of history, it isn't the easiest time for someone to be born. place to be born. One of my colleagues at Fuller Seminary wrote this beautiful paper. We presented at a religious conference, American Academy of Religion conference together, and it's probably the only paper I've ever heard at a conference that I remember, right? Even my own that I've written, and I don't remember those. This one I remember, because she wrote a paper called Parenting as a Vulnerable Hope, right? And what she argued in that paper was, when you have children, you're saying something hopeful about the world. You say they have a future, right? There's something about, I want to bring a child in this world because I can picture a future for them and for us and for our family. That's a hopeful thing to do. But it's also vulnerable because every time you add a relationship to your life, you add suffering and pain and the possibility of a hurt. Right? We've all been in these, some of you have had a difficult experience this Christmas because you have family, and that's not an easy thing, right? We don't get to choose our family. We live with them sometimes, and sometimes it's so difficult that we don't, and it's not easy. Anytime you have a relationship, you have you're vulnerable to pain and suffering. Even C.S. Lewis says, even in the best relationships, you're vulnerable because those relationships can end, right? Somebody can pass away and you will hurt more the more that you love, right? And so when God created us as human beings, he created his own vulnerability. Think about that. And how did he set out to respond to some of our challenges and our problems, to our sin, to the evil, to the suffering in the world? He became vulnerable through becoming a baby, entering into this world with us by becoming a baby. That's pretty astounding to me, that God would care for us that much, that he'd be willing to become, first of all, vulnerable to create because we could hurt him, and then vulnerable to enter into the world that he created and to experience the things that we experience, the suffering, the pain, all those things. Okay, so that's why the second reason. So the first reason is there are just sacred moments in life, and here you have the beautiful sacred moment of Jesus' birth. The second is that the birth of Jesus signals that God is willing enough to be vulnerable to create us and then to help us in some of our difficulties. The third reason why Christmas is meaningful to me, it's the beginning of our story as Christians on how God addresses some of our challenges and our problems. Now, most of you are going to expect me to talk about sin right now, and that's an important challenge. Our own sin, when we do things wrong, right? God needs to address that. When we do things wrong against him, when we do things wrong against one another, God is going to address that in Jesus. When other people sin against us, and we experience the pain and the suffering and the consequences, God needs to address that as well. But what I want to talk about is another problem that we have is a very existential problem and I like how Dietrich Bonhoeffer puts it, we're born in the middle. Some of you have said that, heard me say this before. And what he means by this, being born in the middle, is that we're born into a world that's spinning, not just on its axis, but it's just moving, right? And we're born into it, and we have to try to figure out who we are, what our place in this world is, what's going to give us meaning and significance. And the best that we can do at figuring that out for ourselves is that we catch our clues from one another, right? From other people that are trying to figure out the same problem, right? That's where we get the phrase, the blind leading the blind. And we have a challenge to do that because we have to figure that out, and we feel the tension of trying to figure that out. And we do that in different stages in our life. As teenagers, we're trying to figure that out. When we transition into the workforce in our vocation, we try to figure that out. When we get married, have children, or we're single, or we're widow. We're trying to figure it out all the time. When we retire, we're figuring it out, right? When we're empty nesting, when we were empty nesting and they all came back, all those things, we're just trying to figure that out. And what Bonhoeffer says is, we didn't start the motion of the world. We aren't going to end the motion of the world. The best that we can do is try to pick up clues from one another, right? This is how Paul will say it in 1 Corinthians 13. He says this, "For now we see in a mirror dimly." He's describing this existential problem, right? Now we see in a mirror dimly, but then we will see face to face. Now I know only in part, then I will know fully, even as I have been fully known. What Paul says here is, I don't know. I'm trying to do my best, but it looks pretty dim. I can't see it clearly. But God knows me fully. And so one of the reasons that Christmas is meaningful to me is because how does God help us in this? Right? If we think that God exists and that God cares about us, and we have this existential problem, maybe we should look to see if there are any clues that he might give us to who we are and how we're created, what we're created to do, and what brings us meaning and significance. And Bonhoeffer argues that God has revealed clues to that not in a theory, not in some principles or a self-help book, but in a person. And that person is Jesus Christ, right? Paul says this in Colossians 1:15. Jesus is the image of the invisible God, the firstborn of all creation. For in him all things in heaven and on earth were created, things visible and invisible. And let me just give you 5 things. I like numbers. I was a math guy. 5 things why Bonhoeffer says Jesus is the perfect revelation of God for us in these existential questions. Jesus is the creator of the world. That's what Colossians says, who entered into his creation. He doesn't just stand outside of it, he enters into it. Jesus created the goodness in the world and entered into the world to address evil and injustice when that goodness has gotten corrupted. Jesus is all-powerful, but he endured shame and suffering so that we could be reconciled to God. Jesus is all-knowing, but Luke says that he had to grow in wisdom and stature. This list could go on, right? But what Bonhoeffer said, and I think it's a great argument for the existence of God, is that in the truth of Christianity is that in Jesus, what we find is our answers, a model for who we are, our identity, and some of the meaning and purpose and significant questions that we have in our life. That's the third reason that I think Christmas is meaningful to me. The bonus reason that Christmas is meaningful to me is that God's invitation to us, demonstrated in the Christmas story, is subtle. It's quiet. A baby born in a manger in a small town to humble parents, right? This is a quiet thing. God enters into the world softly. Think of all the ways that God could have done this. He could have used a more prominent family, been in a more important city. He could have came into the world in a more dramatic fashion, right? He could have came at a different time in history. Boy, if social media was back then, what would have happened, right? He could have come at a different time. Or God could have just overwhelmed us with a direct revelation of himself. That doesn't go so well in the Bible when people have an encounter with God, like directly. Usually, boom, they're on their face. Or they're on their knees, right? I love the story in Exodus chapter 33 when Moses asked to see God's glory. And God's response was, you can see my goodness. You can see my graciousness. You can see my mercy. I will even tell you my name, but you cannot see my face. You cannot see my glory, for no one will see my face and live. And he says, Moses, let me put you in this rock, right? And let me put my hand over you, and let me walk by you. And when I'm by you, I'll let you know, and then you can look at my back. That's the best that I can do. Otherwise, you will be overwhelmed, right? God does say that there will be a day when this will happen, when God will reveal himself to the world directly, right? And it says in Philippians 4, every knee will bow, Philippians 2, every knee will bow and every tongue confess that Jesus Christ is Lord, when God does this. But Christmas is not that day. It's a sacred moment where God communicates to us more subtly as to not overwhelm us. And why this is meaningful to me is because it gives you and I agency in our relationship with God. If God revealed it to us directly, we'd be overwhelmed and we'd have to worship. That's what we're going to do, right? Every knee will bow. But God does this subtly to us to invite us into relationship so that we have some agency. Because we all know that agency is important in relationship. If I force you to love me, that's not love. The more agency that we have, the more that love can happen. So when God enters into the world through the incarnation in Christ in this Christmas story that we celebrated, right, on Christmas Eve together and on Christmas Day, he communicates subtly to us about his care and his love for us. Pat, while I sum this up, you all can come up. I'm just going to sum this up with a few quick ways that I think about this. The story of Jesus' birth that we celebrate each year are these 6 things. It's sacred but ordinary. It's beautiful, like any birth of a child, but gritty too. Births are not pretty. It's powerful, but vulnerable at the same time. This is God entering into humanity in vulnerability. It's miraculous, but not spectacular. It's an invitation to us, but it's not overwhelming. And finally, it's the start of the story. It's not the ending of the story. There's more to come in this story. And that's what we're going to talk about in January. Who is this Jesus? And what's the more to come as we move towards Easter?
Just stand and close together.
Hills and plains, repeat the sounding joy. and makes the nations prove the glories of his righteousness and wonders of his love, and wonders of his love, and wonders of his love.
Thank you for being here with us today. We hope that you stay and join us out on the patio. We have baked goods and we have Christmas cookies. If you haven't gotten enough, we still have some Christmas cookies for you. Yeah, that's right. More sugar, right? So we hope that you join us for that. If you are new or visiting, we have a welcome corner outside in the patio, and someone will be there to answer any questions that you might have, and we hope that you'll stop by there. As Ron said, next week we are kicking off the new year looking at the Gospels, and we are really excited about this, to look at the life of Jesus, at his teachings, his healings, his miracles, at how Jesus lived his life, because we are a Jesus-centered community. So we hope that you'll join us on January 4th and the rest of the month to really be digging into the life of Jesus. I wanted to close, as you were closing, Ron, I was reminded of the lyrics of a song called Winter Snow. We didn't do this one this year, but maybe next year. I love the song, and it says, here's the lyrics. You could have come like a mighty storm with all the strength of a hurricane. You could have come like a forest fire with the power of heaven in your flame. But you came like a winter snow, quiet and soft and slow, falling from the sky in the night to the earth below. It goes on and says, your voice wasn't in a bush burning. No, your voice wasn't in a rushing wind. It was still so small, it was hidden. You came like a winter snow. And my prayer for you as you close this year and walk into the new year is that your eyes might be open to that quiet, soft presence of Jesus in your life. May you go in his peace. Amen.